I would do this fight if I was living in a cardboard box. I would do it if I had to use stone knives and bear skins.
Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened.
There is not a liberal America and a conservative America. There is the United States of America.
Good night, and good luck.
Hey folks, it's Rick Wilson, and welcome back to the Lincoln Project's The Elephant in the Room. I'm your host, and we're going to talk about the elephant in the room today. First off, I want to say this. It was a bad night for Joe Biden. I'm not going to spin it for you. I'm just not. But you know what? I've learned as being a pilot for a long time. When you're in an emergency, the first thing you do is fly the plane. In flying, we practice these emergency scenarios all the time. What happens if the engine quits, if your avionics die, if there's a fire in the cockpit, if a bird flies through the window, smacks through your window like a goose flies through your window? You practice those things all the time. And I'll tell you, you practice them so much because you memorize certain parts of it, okay? So you could wake me up in a sound sleep and say, Rick, I've got an engine out. We're flying a Beechcraft Baron. What do you do? And I know what to do. I've memorized the boldface checklist. I know what the flow of the controls is. But the first rule of this, okay, is not to go through the checklist line by line. The first rule of it in any aircraft emergency is to fly the plane. It's the simplest act of all. You fly the plane. If you don't keep flying the plane, you're not going to solve the emergency, and you're going to be out of control, and you're going to crash. And so when you have a problem when you're flying, there are three rules. They're very simple. Fly the plane, which is the aviate, navigate, and communicate. Right now we're in the aviate part. Got to fly the plane. Had a bad night last night. It was late June. Everybody thought this race was kind of settled into a stasis, and I will tell you, it wasn't. Joe Biden went on stage last night with a felon, a man who tears down America, his whole speech last night was tearing down America. He told 500 lies, or however the number is, bragged about ending Roe versus Wade, defended the January 6 terrorists, denied having sex with a porn star, promised to betray Ukraine, talked down our country, really, really wrecked the way he described America. It's always a disaster, it's doom, it's terrible, it's the worst, it's a hellhole. That was the guy Joe Biden went on stage with. And I wrote a piece the other day basically telling Biden how to do this. And sadly, I'm not advising Joe Biden on debate. He went in there and he was trying to talk about parts per billion of carbon and policy stuff, and he got in the weeds. He was over-prepared and he was tired. That's malpractice on the campaign's part. They had him do multiple events that day. That wasn't smart. And so Joe Biden had a bad night. He put in one of the worst debate performances I've seen, and I've seen a lot. And beyond age, there was a sense that wild over-preparation got to him. And I wanted him to prepare. I wanted him to rehearse. But what I thought he should have rehearsed was, the turn to Donald Trump and saying, you're a criminal, you're a felon, you're an idiot. Instead, it was more policy-driven, and I don't think that worked for him. But I'm going to tell you something else, folks. While there is a stampede right now, everybody must get out today, all that stuff, half of it's being driven by the Trump side, which I would do the same thing if I was them, by the way. I'd do the same thing if I was them. But history is full of bad debate performances. I can tell you, 1980, I wasn't there. I was still in junior high, thank you very much. 1980, Ronald Reagan had a bad first debate. He had a terrible first debate. People forget about this. Bill Clinton in 1992, against George Bush and Ross Perot. His first debate was awful. Time magazine ran a cover like, Clinton in third. He's doomed. Is he doomed? Is he out? They were like, the Democratic Party's going to die because Bill Clinton's going down in flames. Happens. I was in Boston in 2000, watching George W. Bush debate Al Gore for the first time. And we're standing backstage, and the then chairman of the Republican National Committee has his head in his hands. He's like, we're so effed. This is going to go wrong. What are we going to do? He can't debate this guy. Al Gore's a genius. Then W turns around in the successive two debates and whips Al Gore's ass on the debate stage. Okay? Obama goes out against John McCain, his first debate. Not great. We tend to overcorrect on what debates mean and what they are. The chattering classes love them. The media loves them. And this year, the media particularly has been looking for ways to accomplish their framing of Joe Biden. They got it last night. Okay, they got it. They got it. There is no spinning this thing. I'm not going to try to spin it for you, but the herd is moving right now. Now, I want to give you some tough love really quickly. The herd is very, very frequently wrong and has to recalibrate itself 7 to 10 days after a panic. Stampedes happen a lot left and right. We're in a stampede. Okay? The thing I'm in a stampede to do is to stay calm. And with everything, with all that, with the entire perspective of last night's debate being terrible, Joe Biden turned in a bad performance. Donald Trump also turned in a terrible performance. I know the MAGAs are like, he's the greatest debater in the history of mankind. But no. Here's the real thing. We'll talk about Trump's debate stuff in a second. Donald Trump remains an existential threat to American democracy, to our republic, to our Constitution, and all of our fundamental liberties. And, last night you saw him talking about Roe in this very weird, cavalier way, pretending he's not the guy who is out there on the stump every day bragging that he put the 3 justices on the court that overturned Roe. He's wrong on the numbers there, folks. The polling does not have him in the right spot with American voters on this. But in addition to all that, you got to remember, he's standing on stage last night with a fraud, a felon, a degenerate, a sexual assaulter, and a guy who is an enemy. As you saw this on the stage last night too, he's a global embarrassment because he's an enemy of freedom and an ally of evil. And I know you think I'm exaggerating that fact, but listen to what he said last night on the stage. He was practically salivating that Putin would take Ukraine. He was practically giggling about it. This is a guy who did not change because of that debate. The choice is now, as it has always been. This election is now, as it has always been, a referendum on Donald Trump. It is a choice, as we've said since 2000, as I've never tired of saying, it's a choice between America or Trump. And you saw that on the debate stage last night. And look, I can't control what the Biden White House or the Democratic Party does next. That is not my job. That is not the job of the Lincoln Project. It's not the job of anybody outside that circle. The only person who can decide to leave this race is Joe Biden. And I'm not giving advice about it. I'm not saying what I think about it because it's not my place in this organizational structure of the pro-democracy ecosystem, okay? I have looked at my job since 2015 when I was one of the first Republican consultants to come out and say, I'm not voting for this guy. I'm not doing it. Here's why. Boom, boom, boom. My reasoning does not often hold up for 9 years in a row, but it's held up for 9 years in a row. He is an enemy of everything this country stands for. And I mean everything. He is a small, bigoted, hateful, terrible, incompetent guy who has a dark vision of America. He doesn't have any optimism. He doesn't have any happiness in him. He doesn't believe in the things that have made this country truly glorious and truly a beacon in the world. He doesn't believe in those things. He wants to destroy them. He says to us every day he wants to destroy them. That didn't change on that debate stage last night. That's the work I do. That's the work we do at the Lincoln Project. And that's the work I believe in, full stop, no conditions, no caveats. That's the work. Defeating Trump is the work. It is the work of our era for anyone who believes that we live in a constitutional republic with and a representative democracy. If you don't believe that and you're on the side of authoritarianism and Trump, shut off the video. Go on. Move. Go do your thing. Everything about authoritarian movements that's sexy and appealing to you is the same thing that will eventually turn on you and crush you. So I can't control what the Democratic Party is going to do. I can't control what the mainstream media is going to do. Those things are out of my hands. Okay? In the coming hours and days, you're going to see the media absolutely feast on this thing. They are going to tear Joe Biden apart like vultures. Okay? And they're also going to be joined by a lot of Democrats who want to seem smart and cynical and worldly, who are going to be out there saying, well, he must leave now because obviously my solution is to put who exactly? Who exactly are you going to put in there? They're not but a lot of them just want to be the Washington type. They want to be the Washington guy. They want to be the one who's like, I'm so worldly, I'm so bitter and dark inside that I'll be the one to pull the trigger on Joe Biden. Guys, he's not Donald Trump, okay? Don't lose the focus on that continued and fundamental truth. He's old, not evil. He had a bad night, but he doesn't have a bad portfolio of ideas that will destroy the freedoms and liberties and constitutional protections in this country. So, I'm kind of a practicing stoic at this point in my life, and so I'm going to control what I can control. I'm going to control my own emotions about this. I'm going to control how I calibrate the responses I have to these things that are meant to evoke big emotions. I'm going to stay cool. I'm going to stay calm about this. And I'm going to, I'm going to tell you, none of this reduces the determination of folks here at the Lincoln Project, or me individually, anybody on our team, about this fight one iota. It has always been our mission to oppose Trump and Trumpism from 2020 till this very minute. It has always been our vision to break this movement, this authoritarian movement around him, and to break him. We've done it once in 2020 at the presidential level. We beat 17 of his people in 2022. We're going to do the same thing this year with Trump. He can still be beaten, and we will. So that's the part of my stoicism is I'm going to dismiss the things I can't control right now. I can't control what the Democrats do. I can't control what the media does. But what I can do, and what I can, listen, there are some things I can't do. I would like to release 400 hungry and rabid Wolverines in Mar-a-Lago because I think it would be fun and funny, but I don't think I'm going to get that wish. But look, what I can control and what we can control is the tempo of messages against Trump, the timing of them, the character. We've got a machine, and there's a lot of other machines in the pro-democracy space right now, and a lot of other voices in the pro-democracy space right now that understand this. Whatever happens with Joe Biden, we cannot for a moment cease the attack on Donald Trump. We cannot for a moment stop kicking him in the nuts every single minute of the day. This is a fight that requires messaging and strategy and communications and social media and ads and placement and grassroots work and everything else. Because if you let him have the next 2 weeks, if Democrats indulge this fantasy of replacing Joe Biden for the next 2 weeks or longer, and you let Donald Trump get an open field and a head of steam, and you let him begin to build up momentum, you will lose. So that's why the attack can never cease on Trump. Wrote about it in the second book. Once you're in the fight with him, you must never leave the fight with him. He will always find a way to try to make you go to sleep or think he's dead or think he's finished, and then he comes back over and over again. He's political herpes. He never stops coming. So everybody in the pro-democracy movement needs to stay in the fight. You need to pull the oars in this big boat in the same direction, everybody. And I mean, we can control a lot of things that we do. We can keep splitting off those messages for GOP voters who are uncomfortable with Trump. There are more than there were in 2016 and more than there were in 2020. That number is evidenced by Nikki Haley's performance, by the numbers we're seeing in our focus grouping, polling, and other data research out there. We've got to keep splitting those people off. We've got to all keep telling the truth about what Trump did last night also. This wasn't some triumph of rhetoric. This wasn't some controlled guy. He told a set of stories that were so luridly untrue, so insanely false, over and over and over again, that an army of fact checkers and trained linguists could spend a month parsing all of them. It was an insane performance. And if Joe Biden had an even slightly better night, the story narrative right now would be that Donald Trump's off his fucking rocker, that this is a guy who is completely bonkers. Because the things he was saying last night about this country, the lies came so hot and heavy, it was kind of astounding. Like I said, it's this Baron von Munchausen fantasy world he lives in that didn't get fact-checked on the stage, that didn't get fact-checked much after, got a bit after, but post hoc fact-checking with this guy just doesn't work the same way. And he didn't stop lying. He never does. But let me say this also. Let's take the phrase that Donald Trump won the debate. Okay, all right, use that phrase. Use it all you want. Donald Trump did not suddenly get exonerated last night of 34 felony counts. He did not stop being a sexual assaulter last night. He's not a better or stronger or more honorable guy than he was yesterday. In fact, I'd argue that he keeps revealing to us how dark and wrong he is. He is a felon. He's still a felon. You can win 1,000 debates. He's still going to be a felon and a criminal. He's still this repugnant, low, horrible creature. And the catalog of lies last night wasn't new. All the stuff about immigrants, it's purely feeding the base, okay? And again, if you took the color of Biden's bad performance last night out of the picture, nothing Donald Trump said last night was an appeal to the voters that Nikki Haley was winning. None of what he said last night was an appeal to independent voters who were out there, because it was so over the top. It was so crazy. And it all came down, again, this very dark, pessimistic vision about this. Guys, nothing about Trump changed after last night. And I want to say this, 130 days is an absolute eternity in politics, okay? And I want to give you an example of a window about 130 days. I was trying to think of it last night. It kind of percolated up, and I thought about it this morning when the dogs were howling and wanting to go outside. When the Germans invaded France, here's your World War II history lesson. When the Germans invaded France in 1940, they fell pretty quickly. And Europe was in shock. England was in shock. They'd been defeated and thrown off the continent at Dunkirk a little while before that. And Winston Churchill had been in office about 2 months. And he gave a series of 3 speeches. The first was the Fight on the Beaches speech. But the one I'm going to talk about is the last of the 3. And it's called the Finest Hour speech. Because Winston Churchill gave that speech in June. By the fall, about 130 days later, the Battle of Britain had led to the defeat of the Luftwaffe. It had broken Hitler's ability to invade and destroy England. Churchill understood this. It was one of the most famous speeches in history. And, you know, that hour, that world looked dark and impossible and terrible. And Churchill knew this wasn't just a rhetorical construct. He knew that unless they fought in that window of time, between the time that the shock of the fall of France had set in and the German invasion, unless he knew that if they didn't fight every day, they would fall. He would die. The country would die. So in the Finest Hour speech, and I'm just going to pick 2 sections, and I'm going to read them to you. And I cannot imitate Winston Churchill sufficiently, but I'm not going to try. And I want you to ponder these 2 sections as you feel depressed and as you're worried right now, as you think that this is all over and that Trump's going to win. Because this guy faced something much bigger. And Trump may be the spiritual heir to what Winston Churchill faced. But I want you to take these two paragraphs to heart. In casting up this dread balance sheet, contemplating our dangers with a disillusioned eye, I see great reason for intense vigilance and exertion, but none whatever for panic and despair. During the first 4 years of the last war, the Allies experienced nothing but disaster and disappointment, and yet at the end their morale was higher than that of the Germans, who had moved from one aggressive triumph to the other. During that war, we repeatedly asked ourselves the question, how are we going to win? And no one was able to answer it with much precision until, at the end, quite suddenly, quite unexpectedly, our terrible foe collapsed before us. And the second graph I want you to listen to and really internalize this, folks. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be freed, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into an abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Therefore, let us brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves. If the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will say, this was their finest hour. Here's the thing about finest hours, everybody. You have to earn them. The fight continues, and you have to earn them. You have to wage the war against the evil that is Trump and his movement. And it is evil. I'm not going to parse it. I'm not going to spin it. I'm not going to do the polite thing and, oh, it's just a different. No, it's not. okay? You have to earn your finest hour. And I am confident that if we wage this war on Trump, and it must be relentless, and it must be unmerciful, and never leave the fight. We've got 130 some days to go, folks. And if we do that, our terrible foe will collapse before us. Hey, folks, if you want to read the origin story of this video, it's on my Substack. You can find it easily there. It's today's top story. And I also want to say, the Lincoln Project yesterday had one of its biggest fundraising days in the last couple years. Why is that? It's because grassroots donors and large donors all understood something. We play a unique role in this fight. We are not like a lot of other super PACs. We are not the nice people. We're the Blackwater of the super PAC world right now. We're the ones who will take the fight to Trump, even on bad days, even when it's tough. We're not going to stop. We're not going to rest. We'd love to have your support. You can reach us at lincolnproject.us/donate if you want to help us out. We'd be grateful. The more we are able to go out into the swing states right now and keep dividing up the Republican, soft Republican votes that we're very good at talking to, the better. We'd appreciate it, and we look forward to having you in the fight with us. We'll talk to you again next time. Thanks, everybody.
Good night and good luck.